Now that we've successfully gotten the Rotzeach to the Ir Miklat, we need to figure out if and how and when he leaves. It would have been intuitive to say that the Rotzeach stays in the Ir Miklat until it's safe for him to leave, with the death of the Goel Hadam. However, the Rotzeach is actually granted his freedom with the death of the Kohen Gadol. Our Mishnah explains which Kohanim Gedolim qualify to release the Rotzeach with their death. Echad mashuach b'shemen hamishcha, ve'echad hamerubeh b'vgadim, ve'echad she'avar mimashichuto, machzirin et harotzeach. When the Mishnah says echad, 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 it means this one or that one or the other one. So we have 3 different Kohanim who would be sufficient to lahachzir et harotzeach, meaning to return him home. The first is the mashuach b'shemen hamishcha, the one who was anointed by the anointing oil. That's our full-fledged, totally functional Kohen Gadol. Ve'echad hamurubeh b'vgadim, and the merubeh b'vgadim is someone who is a little bit more of a functionary of a Kohen Gadol. He doesn't actually have the full anointing. He's not able to do the full avodah. And echad she'avar mimashichuto, the one who has passed from his being anointed, that's the retiree. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, af mashuach milchama machzir et harotzeach. Rabbi Yehuda says, even a Kohen Gadol who isn't really a full Kohen Gadol, he's just the one who was anointed to go out to war and give the rousing speech for the people before they go into battle. Even he, if he dies, that is powerful enough for the Rotzeach to go back home. Lefikach, because the freedom of the Rotzeach is tied up in the death of the Kohen Gadol, Imotehan shel haKohanim, the mothers of the Kohanim, misapkot lahen michya, they would supply for them, that is the killer's, sustenance, uchsut, and clothes, kedei shelo yitpalalu al pneihem sheyamutu, so that these rotzchim would not pray for their sons, the Kohanim, to die. The fact that the freedom of the Rotzeach hinges on the death of the Kohen Gadol creates an uncomfortable reality which the Mishnah recognizes, and maybe no one talks about. But the mothers of the Kohanim are sensitive to this dynamic and concerned about it. What is so beautiful about this is that instead of this tension leading to unpleasantness, it results in a relationship between the mothers of the Kohanim and these killers. It provides the killers with surrogate mothers who provide them with meals and with clothes. However, the Gemara is concerned not with how sweet this is, but how reasonable this reaction is. Do the mothers really believe that if the killers were to pray for the death of their sons, that prayer would be successful? And even if the killers would be praying for the death of the Kohen Gadol, would that prayer be effective? So why do the mothers need to worry about it? Before we go into the technicalities here, I just want to acknowledge that on a simple level, what is happening here is emotional. Even if the mothers don't think that God will actually kill their sons based on the prayers of the Rotzeach, they don't want anyone praying for their son's demise. But the Gemara is going to go in and look at this a little bit more technically. Lefikach imotean shel kohanim ... Tama delo matzlu. The reason is that they didn't daven. Hamatzlu, that implies that if they were to daven, if they were to pray, mighty, the kohanim would die. V'hachtiv, but I have a pasuk that says, Ketzipor lanod, kedvor lauf, like a bird that flies, kein kilalat chinam lo tavo. So too a curse that is based on nothing will not come to pass. If these kohanim are not actually liable for death, it doesn't matter that they're being cursed. It doesn't matter about these prayers. These prayers are silly. These prayers are ineffective. These prayers are flying away. And so comes in Hahu Saba, okay? This older gentleman that sort of appears. And he says, Mi pirkei de Rava, from the class, I was in Rava's class. Shemi Ali, I learned, Shahaya lahen levakesh rachamim al doran, that it was incumbent upon them, that is the Kohanim, to ask for mercy on their generation, velo bikshu, and they didn't ask. So the Gemara says, wait a minute. Are you trying to imply that if these people were to pray for the death of the Kohanim would die? That's preposterous. A curse that's based on nothing will not come to pass. And then Hahu Saba, this older gentleman, comes in and he says, this is not a curse based on nothing. This is a curse based on something. These Kohanim, in fact, are to blame. The prayers would have merit. This is both a statement about prayer and a statement about the Kohanim. First, it takes the power of prayer very seriously. Had the Kohanim prayed, this terrible accident would not have happened. And if the Rotseach were to pray, his prayers would also be answered, and the Kohanim would be in mortal danger. Second, it's a commentary on the role of the Kohen, and perhaps an explanation for why the death of the Kohen Gadol is what releases the Rotseach from the city of refuge. No matter what happens to anyone, anywhere, the Kohen is connected and the Kohen is responsible. So perhaps the person who is really rightly incarcerated in the Ir Miklat is the Kohen, the person who is responsible on a spiritual level. So when they die, the truly guilty party has died, and the release of the Rotseach merely reflects that. The Gemara then proceeds with another version of the same conversation. Ve'ika dematni, and there are those that teach it this way. Kedei sheyitbalalu al b'neihem shelo yamutu. That the text of the Mishnah is not that they're worried that the Rotzchim are going to pray for the death. Rather, they are trying to encourage the Rotzchim to pray for the welfare of their children, to pray for them that they not die. And then we're going to ask the same question. Ta'ama dimatzlu. The reason that this would happen is because they prayed. Ha lo matzlu maiti. Then, if they didn't pray, that would imply that they would die. Mai havale lamevad. What were they supposed to have done? Hacha amrinan. Tuvia chata v'zegod mangid. Hatam amre shchem nasiv umivgai gazir. Okay, so there's two different colloquial sayings. One that is being said here, that is in Bavel, and one that is being said over there in Eretz Yisrael. It's two ways of saying the exact same thing. And it's essentially, why is one person being punished for somebody else's act? Okay? Why would the Kohanim be on the hook? Why should the Rotzchim be praying about them and the Kohanim be on the hook if the Rotzchim are the ones who have sinned? Okay, so here in Bavel, the way that we say it is, Tuvia is the one who sinned, but Zingod is the one who's going to get lashes. And in Eretz Yisrael, they would say, Shchem is the one who's getting married. Okay, but Mivgai is the one who has to also have a Brit Milah. He's the one who's going to get cut. It's not fair. The person who sins is the person who should get the punishment, and the person who's getting the benefit is the person who should pay. So comes our good friend Hahu Saba, and he says, Mi pirkei de Rava Shmiali. I have actually heard an interesting class about this from Rava. Shahaya lahen levakesh rachamim al doran velo bikshu. The Kohanim were supposed to pray for their generation, and they didn't pray. So in fact, it's not a situation where one person sins and another person is punished. The Kohanim themselves had sinned because they didn't understand the gravity of the situation, and they did not pray. Kiha dehahu gavra, like a similar story about a person, de'achle aryeh, he was eaten by a lion. Berichuk talta parse, minei de Rabbi Shua ben Levi, 3 parasangs away from where Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi was. Velo ishtai Eliyahu bahadeh tlat hayomeh. And in punishment, in recompense, Eliyahu gave him the silent treatment and didn't talk to Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi for 3 days. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi is not the one who ate this person. It was the lion that ate this person. But because Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi was not praying enough, was not protecting his people enough, and somebody was able to have this terrible accident happen on his watch, Eliyahu says he's not going to talk to him. He's not going to talk to him for 3 days in payment for the 3 parasangs of distance where this terrible accident happened. The conclusion of this sugya is a strong restatement of the principle that leaders are responsible for what happens in their community. And in the case of the Kohen Gadol, the community includes every Jew. On the one hand, if we take this literally, it's a strong condemnation of the Kohen Gadol, who seems to be held responsible for something he didn't do. But another way to understand this is not as descriptive, but as prescriptive. One way to respond to the tragedy of this loss of life is to become vindictive and to seek revenge. But perhaps a better way to respond is to look to the leaders, to seek to strengthen each other and realize that our fates are intertwined. We aren't all the Kohen Gadol, but we all suffer when life is lost. And we are all called upon to hope and pray for a better world with less senseless suffering and more care. In this session, we talked about the way that the death of the Kohen Gadol is going to end the sentence of the killer in the miklat. In next session, we'll talk about what happens when the Kohen Gadol dies a little early, when he dies before the killer even makes their way to the miklat, and when do we decide that that death ends the sentence, or when do we decide that actually we have to wait until the next Kohen Gadol passes for the killer to get their freedom?